I'm Gordon Howie, and this is Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest presidents who ever lived. And it's such a privilege to have these conversations with you, Mr. President. One of the things that I know about you is that you really are a student of history. You didn't just make history, you knew history. And one of the historical figures in our nation that is profoundly important is George Washington. I've heard him referred to as bulletproof George Washington. Tell us about what you knew regarding George Washington, our first president.
Well, I remember a time when they asked me to do a eulogy for him on his birthday. And I said I could no more do a eulogy about him than add luster to the sun. His name is magnificent and needs no embellishment. Let his name shine on, and let us meditate upon the name George Washington. That's how I felt about him, and I felt about him because everybody else believed what Lee had said, Racehorse Lee, first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. That was after 44 years of leading us from the French and Indian War all the way to the first two presidencies. He was the president of the Constitutional Convention and chosen unanimously for those three positions, as well as unanimously selected to be Commander-in-Chief of all the Army.
I think the most profound description I've heard of George Washington ever is when you refer to him as America's Moses. Many pastors
Said that again and again, and partly because he transcended 44 years of service. His fame grew profoundly during the French and Indian War in 1755. He's just in his early 20s, and he served Braddock, a very pompous general from England, who lined up his troops in the redcoats, marching through the woods towards what is now Pittsburgh, to go and seize, run the French off, because they were encroaching on American land. Both the British and the French claimed all of that land between the Ohio River and the Alleghenies and all the way to Canada. And so they were marching along. George said it was one of the most magnificent things he'd ever seen, stretched out for miles, but he went and told Braddock, we can't do this. The Indians fight from ambush. We've been here dealing with this for many years. This is dangerous. So they don't know how to fight. These are the finest soldiers in the world. So they marched along, and sure enough, they were ambushed. 86 officers, like 68 were wounded. All of the mounted officers were killed or wounded, shot from their horse. There was only one mounted officer left, 6'2½", 200 pounds, George Washington. The Indians, and he had 4 bullet holes go through him. This is from a letter he wrote to his brother.
It was a large
target. He had 2 horses killed from under him, 4 bullets through his coat. They found a GW medallion, his family crest, many years later that had been shot off. And anyway, Braddock got shot, mortally wounded. So he was in charge of the retreat, of the bloodbath, while the Indians were screaming and scalping the fallen Brits, who panicked and freaked completely out. And so George was responsible for the retreat, and he didn't want the general's body desecrated, so he acted as pastor at the funeral. They buried the man in the road and drove forth and back over him so the Indians wouldn't dig him up and bury him. And desecrate his body, because that would have been a great treat for them, having his scalp and everything else, his outfit. And after that, there was a Dr. Craig with him at this Holocaust and was there as the general died. And this amazing retreat was he was regarded, George Washington, as a great hero. Years later, an old chief came and found him and Dr. Craig back in that area and said, before I go to the land of shades with my forefathers, I must tell you by way of prophecy, I remember the time by the great river where the blood of the white man and the British mingled with the waters of the rivers. And I saw you standing there riding your horse, and I said, mark yon officer, his troops do not fight as ours. They fight like we do. They don't fight like the redcoats. Kill him and we win the day. I shot at him 17 fair fires. Bullets, marksmen, the warriors fired at him, shots that knew not how to miss. And I had to finally say, stop. He is being protected by the Great Spirit. So I come here today by way of prophecy to tell you, this man, pointing at George Washington, cannot die in battle, and he will raise up a great nation as the leader of a great people.
And those, my friends, might have been the words of God coming through his lips about America's Moses. You've heard it from Abraham Lincoln.
And he rode within 30 feet of the Brits and didn't die. And you're right, it was prophetic. And George knew it.
Stay tuned. We'll be back with more